Russians are getting a little bit more confident after their relative success in the east. But in case they decide to proceed and continue their invasion based on this boosted morale, this can be their fatal mistake, which will cost them everything. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first video comes to us from Lviv, where the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, paid his respects to the fallen soldiers of Ukraine. And after this, Zelensky had a meeting with the president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, and the president of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, where they signed Lublinsky Triangle Declaration. And as a result of this, Poland is giving Leopard tanks to Ukraine, and Lithuania is giving Bofors L-70 air defense systems. Our next stop brings us to Kharkiv, where one of previous nights Russians were able to destroy a warehouse full of fireworks. But according to some Russian sources, they were able to destroy a warehouse full of ammunition, obviously. This has been one of the most recent attacks of Russians against Ukrainian infrastructure, but in all seriousness, there are signs about another upcoming massive attack of Russians. Such as, for example, according to Naval News, which has also been indirectly confirmed by Natalia Gumenyuk, 3 Russian submarines carrying Kaliber missiles have left Novorossiysk port. And as for now, it is estimated that they will continue going deeper inside the Black Sea area, closer to Ukraine. We then also have another statement by the representative of the General Staff of Ukraine, Oleksiy Khromov, who is mentioning that there is an increased risk of attack by Russians from the territory of Belarus using missiles and drones. According to him, at least 10 Mi-8 and Mi-24 Russian helicopters have been transported closer to the borders with Ukraine. And then right here, for example, we can see one of the satellite images from Zyabryka airport, located close to Homel, Belarus, and we can also see that Russians are doing some preparations activities. And among the new things which have been spotted on the territory of this airfield are S-300 missile systems, embankments, radars, and just in general a lot of tire marks. We then even have videos like this, which show us military trains arriving on the territory of Belarus. And reportedly, one of them brought as many as 750 Russian soldiers, while the other brought a lot of military vehicles and equipment. And then ultimately, right here we have a picture of a Belarus tank brigade allegedly performing practice exercises. And so yes, if you remember from my previous episodes, I was already making the assumption that Russia might potentially just show the intentions to invade Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. I still personally do not believe that the actual invasion will happen, but I mean, Russian military tactics, sometimes it can bypass all the laws of logic. And for this reason, in case something does happen in the near future, and if you don't want to miss any of these updates, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and just see how I live outside of YouTube. Alright, and now back to the territory of Ukraine, where obviously the most active battle zone in this very moment is located in the east. But before I talk about Bakhmut and Soledar, allow me to give you a very quick update from the south, where recently at least one very interesting event happened. And first of all, according to Ukrainian sources, they were able to hit and destroy a Russian military base located in Oleshki. In response to that, Russians have been shelling Kherson city, and one of the civilian infrastructures which has been affected is this maternity hospital. And one of the most important things that happened in this area recently is that, according to some Ukrainian officials, Russians are taking away their military assets and military vehicles further away from the south in order to avoid the attacks by Ukrainian HIMARS. One of the main directions of such tactical reallocation, as Russians would call it, is from the airfield located in Chaplinka to the airfield in Berdyansk. And as you can see from this satellite image, which came to us exactly from Berdyansk airport, there are at least 17 new helicopters and defense structures which have not been there just several months ago. Like mentioned previously, most likely Russians are just moving further away from HIMARS range, but just in case there is a possibility that this military equipment and vehicles will be used by Russians to provide the fire support in the east. And so right now, let's talk in a little bit more details about this area. Where first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians continued to make at least small gains along Svatove-Kreminna road. The main focus of Russians in this area was to protect Svatove, while Ukrainians mainly tried to advance closer to Kreminna, as well as attacking the rear targets in Luhansk region. And reportedly, Russians brought a little bit reinforcements to Kreminna in order to help with the quote-unquote protection of this city. Russians also attempted to advance close to Spirne, but Ukrainians were able to resist this attack. But of course, the most intense fighting in the last several days is happening around Soledar, where according to the current information I have at this very moment, Russians are controlling the majority of this city. But according to the Russian propaganda and the leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, Russia was able to establish the full control over Soledar. They even presented us with this picture, which is basically Prigozhin, surrounded by Wagner soldiers from one of Soledar's salt mines. But the total capture of this settlement by Russians has not been yet fully confirmed, including by the press secretary of Russia Dmitry Peskov, who said that it is too early to tell. You can even see it on this map, which shows that the city is approached by Russians from 3 different sides, but it is not yet fully encircled. But among the bad news is that according to Alexei Arestovich, this road which leads to the city from the south is under fire control by Russians. And so yes, the battle for Soledar still goes on, and just like Russians, Ukrainians are inflicting damages and losses on the enemy. And reportedly, with just one precise artillery strike, Ukrainians were able to eliminate the entire group of Wagner soldiers. This is also indirectly confirmed by the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Anna Malyar, who is saying that Russians, especially Wagner soldiers, are experiencing heavy losses. And as for now, Russians who are for the very first time since so long ago, who feel that at least a small victory is possible, they started to replace the soldiers who are currently in Soledar, which basically means they remove the ones who are injured and tired and bring the new, fresh reinforcements. But despite their efforts, Soledar as for now still stands. As you can see, just like in Bakhmut, Russians are pushing so hard to capture this new trophy city. And along the way, thousands of Russian soldiers will be lost, and they don't even know whether they will succeed or not. So whenever Russian propagandist and Yevgeny Prigozhin said that Soledar is under Russian control, they, to say the least, started celebrating way too early. And as we all know, this never ends well. And according to the representative of the Eastern Army of Ukraine, Sergei Cherevatый, the next 24 hours will be extremely important for the future of Soledar. And most likely, Ukrainian military officials will be deciding how they should adjust their defense tactics in order to protect the city more effectively. But unfortunately, no matter what happens next, Soledar is already in ruins. As you can see from these satellite images, the first one was taken somewhere in this summer, and the second one is most recent from this January. We then also have this picture, and before we continue, just please let me know what do you think you are looking at. And well, the answer is the thousands of craters left after artillery strikes near Bakhmut roads. And speaking about the city itself, the situation inside Bakhmut is not as intense as in Soledar. And reportedly, Ukrainian special forces are doing their missions now mainly during the night, and most of them are successful because of the lack of night vision equipment among Russian soldiers. And just like with Soledar, right here we have a picture of Bakhmut before the war, and right here is the picture of Bakhmut at this moment. I also recently received a video of a special forces called Conflict Resolution operating in Bakhmut. But since my channel is still unfortunately demonetized, most likely because of showing videos like this in the past, I decided to upload this video along with other uncensored footage to my Patreon. And if you want to support my work and see these photos and videos, the link will be down below. Alright, so the situation in the east is escalating a little bit in the favor of Russians, and they are getting a little bit more confident. And according to the Secretary of the Security Council of Ukraine, Oleksiy Danilov, the next 2 to 3 months will be extremely important and decisive, and Russia will most likely go all in. One of the reasons for this is because the Russian authorities were not able to present any kind of victory to its Z patriots and propagandists in a very long time. Some announcements were even expected during Putin's New Year's speech, but this didn't happen either. And so, potentially, Russia might try to do everything possible to present at least something at this point on February 24th, because we already know how much Putin loves symbolism. And even if Russia is fully successful in Bakhmut and Soledar in the near future, most likely by that time, regular Russians will already forget about these two cities. That is why Russia might attempt to capture something new. But could this all mean that Russia is making a fatal mistake that potentially can cost them everything? The words of Danilov are indirectly confirmed by Dmitry Peskov, who is saying that the offensive of Russia must go on and they cannot stop right now. Which basically means that Russia is getting more confident, or maybe even a little bit too confident, and in case this offensive does happen, I can potentially see only two scenarios. The first one is that Russia will try to fully capture one of the regions, either Luhansk or Donetsk, and liberate another major city in another region. And the second scenario is that Russians whose morale will be boosted will be stopped by Ukrainians who are learning from their previous mistakes. In this case, the retribution of Ukrainians who are furious after Bakhmut and Soledar will be immediate, which means that Russians will not be able to advance anywhere. But in case they do, according to Oleksiy Khromov, right after capturing Donbass, good luck with that, Russians might attempt to also capture Zaporozhye region. And in order for this to have at least the slightest chances of happening, Russia will obviously need way more people. And according to Anna Malyar, Russians are bringing more soldiers to the east, from Russia itself, from the north and even from the south. And reportedly, the number of military formations increased from 250 to 280. And according to Sergei Haidai, in Luhansk region alone, there are at least 30,000 Russian soldiers. But I mean, just because Russia was relatively successful in two small cities at a cost of thousands of lives and several months of offensive, which is still not yet concluded, this does not mean that Russia was able to drastically change the course of war. And this most certainly does not mean that Russia will start marching across Ukraine and taking city by city. Just like with gambling, for example, you win at least once and you start feeling like the luck is always on your side. You start counting the money, dreaming that you won them in jackpot, you start making plans for the future, but the problem is that you don't yet have this money. And as long as this is your approach, sooner or later if you continue gambling and increasing the stakes, you will eventually lose everything. And so the question is, will this temporarily morale boost and greed that Russians are experiencing right now, will this become their fatal flaw that will cause them losing in this war? And I'm pretty positive that we will get our answer in the near future. And if you don't want to miss any of these updates as soon as they start happening, just please once again subscribe to my channel, it only takes one click. And if you want to support my work due to still ongoing demonetization, please consider becoming my channel member, use the PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you receive early access to the uncensored footage. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.